references in Matthew chapter 5, 6, and 7, I needed to study the context of Matthew's gospel where the Sermon on the Mount is to be found. And when I went to Matthew's gospel, I mean, this wasn't the first time I had read the gospel, I stumbled into some things I had not recognized before, sort of like Ginger losing weight. An unintended consequence was that I rediscovered or was rediscovered by Matthew's gospel. And when I went and looked at Matthew closely, it dawned on me that Matthew has a pulsating, dominating conviction and thesis that underlies that entire gospel. And it might be said this way: we are family. God made us that way. Jesus calls us to follow in his footsteps as his disciples and transform the human race into the human family of God. Well, stay with me now. I'm going to keep this brief. Stay with me now. We are family. You can see it in Matthew's gospel. I'm so excited about this, I don't know what to do. You can see it in Matthew's gospel from beginning to end. For example, Matthew's gospel begins with the genealogy, which is sort of Jesus' family tree. Now remember, biblical genealogies are highly symbolic. I mean, they're intended to send a message, to teach us something. And so each of the gospel writers, sometimes they have their own genealogy, and they do it differently because they're trying to get you to understand something unique and incredible about Jesus. And if you take Luke chapter 3 and Matthew chapter 1 and lay them side by side, you will see that Luke has a genealogy of Jesus and Matthew has one. They're pretty similar, but there are a few differences. One difference is that Luke decided to tell the story of Jesus' family tree by beginning with Adam. Okay, but that makes sense. I mean, Luke is like into, everybody is a descendant of Adam. And so he's tying Jesus into that. Matthew makes a point of tying Jesus to Abraham. Stay with me, church. Abraham. And I think there's a reason for that. Because if you go back in the 12th chapter of Genesis, where Abraham and Sarah first encounter God, and God tells them, I'm going to take you from your homeland, from everything that you know, and I'm going to take you to a land that you do not know, and those who curse you, I will curse. Those who bless you, I will bless. So that through you, all the peoples, in fact, my version says, through you, all the families of the earth will be blessed. Oh, Matthew knew what he was doing. We are family. And God made us that way. Jesus has called us to be his disciples, to walk in his footsteps, in his way, to help to transform us from the human race into the human family of God. Oh, we are family. All right, let me unpack it a little bit more. If you keep going in that genealogy, genealogies are interesting. My wife's in the genealogy. She's gotten into family genealogy and she's been tracing her family, which is good. She started getting into mine. I said, well, you might be careful. You get up in that tree too high. There's some critters up there you might not want to know about. But if you go deeper into the genealogy of Jesus, you'll discover that this is a classic Jewish genealogy. A classic standard Jewish genealogy of the first century would trace the male line, male Jews. I mean, it's a Jewish genealogy, so it would trace male Jews. That's how it would go. And if you look at Luke, Luke pretty much conforms to that pattern, in fact. But if you look at Matthew, he pretty much traces the male line, and then all of a sudden, you run into somebody named Tamar. You say, who is Tamar? Tamar, that's not a man. You go back in Genesis and read about Tamar. Tamar was a woman. And in more than that, Tamar was not just a woman, she was a Canaanite woman. She was not a Jew. And then you keep reading on in the genealogy, and another ancestress of Jesus is a woman named Rahab. I like Rahab. I'm getting into somebody's business now. They put Sister Rahab, and she is an ancestress of Jesus. Now, I know you all read Bibles. They still have Bibles in the future. I don't know when we put those Bibles in that pew. I wasn't checking. It's still there. Yeah, you some of his troops, I want y'all to go into Jericho and spy out. I want you to identify the strong fortifications. And he said, when you get tired, just go to Rahab's place. He doesn't give them any directions. He just says, go and see Rahab. It tells you a whole lot. Everybody knew Rahab. Well, Rahab was a woman, and she obviously had made a living in her time, but she also was not Jewish. And then you keep going through, you'll discover Ruth. Oh, I saw Ruth Baldwin right here. When you get to Ruth, who is the grandmother of King David, Ruth is not a Jew. She is from Moab. And then you get to Bathsheba, the mother of King Solomon. Bathsheba, y'all remember David saw Bathsheba. That sister was fine. Let me tell you, she was something else. The boy was about to lose the whole kingdom over Bathsheba. And he didn't care. Bathsheba was a Hittite. She wasn't Jewish. And when you start wondering, why would Matthew include Gentile women in a male genealogy of Jesus, I want to suggest that Matthew's trying to tell us something. We are family. God made us that way. This Jesus has come into the world to help us live that way. And then it goes on from there. Matthew, do you know Matthew is the only gospel that tells us the story of the wise men? Luke does not tell it. No. Mark doesn't have a birth story, and John is like off the planet. It's only Matthew who tells us the story of the Magi. And the Magi were not Jewish. They were Gentiles. Non-Jews came to the Jewish Messiah from afar to worship. Matthew's trying to tell us something. We are family, and then if you keep going through Matthew's gospel, I'm not going to go through the whole thing. You get to the 8th chapter of Matthew's gospel, and a Roman centurion comes up to Jesus. Now you can't get more non-Jewish than a Roman centurion. A Roman centurion has heard about Jesus. He comes to Jesus and he said, Jesus, my servant is suffering and I need you to heal him. Now I want you to understand how incredible that is. First of all, you've got a Roman centurion worried about his slave, who actually cares about it. That didn't happen. That was not normal. Folk didn't care about their slaves. Not only that, he came to an itinerant Jewish rabbi named Jesus. He said, I heard you got some power, and I want you to heal my servant. Please. Roman centurion did not plead or beg the people they had conquered. And Jesus said, I haven't seen faith like this in all of Israel. And then Jesus says, now I know that the day is coming when men and women will come from east and west to sit at the table with Abraham. Y'all see it now? We are family. That's what Matthew's trying to get us up. We are family. God has made us that way. And Jesus has come to show us how to live that way. And more on top, if you keep going on and keep peeling the layers, you'll see even more. Y'all remember the 25th chapter of Matthew? Remember the parable of the sheep and goats? The parable of the last judgment? Y'all remember the story where the king comes to judgment day? And he says, it's time for judgment. And I'm going to decide who's going to heaven and who's going to hell. Right? And I know Mr. Payne said, well, we know the Book of Common Prayer. And the judge is going to say, that's nice, but that's not what I'm getting at. Then our Baptist sisters and brothers come up, we know the Bible. And the king will say, that's nice too, but that's not what I'm getting at either. He's going to say, here's what the master's going to use to determine. Did you love somebody? Did you feed somebody who was hungry? Did you clothe somebody who was naked? Did you visit somebody who was by themselves? Did you do justice